In today's bird tutorial, we're doing a bluebird. Now, when I made the video showing how I designed all of the birds and laid them out for my collage, I actually had a viewer point out the fact that the bluebird I chose for my collage was actually not a North American bluebird. You can tell that I don't know that much about birds. And the viewer suggested that if I wanted to keep all of my birds North American birds, why not just change out the coloring and do an Eastern bluebird? Great idea. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to use the same pose and reference photo from my original bluebird photo, but apply the coloring of an Eastern bluebird. Easy peasy, right? So after we do the initial sketch of the bluebird, we'll have a reference photo pulled up showing the coloring of an Eastern bluebird, and that's what will follow when we do the painting. So again, if you're doing this as a standalone painting, don't worry about trying to match it up with all the other birds or any of that. You can certainly paint this as a single painting. Colors you'll need for the bluebird are some sort of blue. I'm going to be using ultramarine blue and probably combining it with a little bit of phthalo blue. So the two blues on my palette here, I'll be using Daniel Smith Indigo. And for the orange on the bluebird, I'll be using transparent orange and burnt sienna. So grab your pencil and let's get started. I already did a really rough outline of the bird just so I could get the placement correct. And I used my initial study as a guide for the placement. Once you have an envelope shape of your bird, in this case it's just kind of this oval with a little bit of a bump on the top for the head, then you can start tightening up all of the details. Now, because we are changing the coloring of this bird a little bit, instead of the yellow being right here as you see in this reference photo, we're going to pull that orange color all the way up over the shoulder of the wing. So that's something you can actually just do with paint. You don't really have to worry about that with a sketch. Let's just focus on getting the outside shape of the bird as correct as possible. So I'll start with the pointy little beak. And I do like this pose a lot. Better than the other photo that I'm using for the coloring. I like the way the head is turning inward. Since a lot of these birds are really just profile faces, I think the bluebird's turning head is really interesting. So that's why I'm sticking with this original reference photo. Things to start thinking about as you do your sketch are areas where maybe you want to have some lost edges. A theme of this collage has been lost and found edges with the birds. And you can see here on the goldfinch we had a beautiful lost edge right there. So we want to do something similar to that with the bluebird. But first, let's get the overall sketch down. Nice rounded belly. The bottom of the wing comes about halfway. It's a good marking. And then you've got the pointed shape of the tip of the wing and the little tail coming back, slanting down at an angle. Erase any excess pencil lines, and in fact you can even erase the outer edge of your pencil a little bit so that it's less visible. We don't want all of that showing up underneath the paint. All right, and then for the placement of the eye, I'm just checking the distance from the back of the head to the eye to the front of the head, and actually I misjudged that a little. The eye is pretty much right in the center here. So it's a good thing to double check your measurements before going in with dark pencil marks. And then in my reference photo, there's a dark ridge right here, but that's not the case for the Eastern bluebird, so I'm going to leave that out. If you want to mark maybe the base of the head where the blue will meet the orange, just use very light pencil dash marks. And then that orange is going to creep along a little higher along the back here, and the wings will be entirely blue. All right, so let's draw right in the center of the wing here, a curved shape, where we see the very small downy feathers separating from the wing feathers, and just a couple of parallel lines suggesting these separated wings. You don't have to count each one and make sure that you have the exact amount. We're just hinting or suggesting at those there. Then you've got the two little feet coming down at an angle. Love those spindly little bird feet. So now's your chance to just double check your drawing. You can tilt your board up at an angle to make sure you haven't accidentally elongated anything. I'm just gonna soften out the head a little bit. Make sure that my pencil markings aren't too harsh. And as far as lost edges go, I think I'll put one right here in the front of the belly, and then the back of the tail, will let that blur out a little bit. So with that, the sketch is done. Let's grab our paints and start the painting. All right, I've got my silver black velvet size 4 round brush. It's a large enough bristle for flat washes on things like the belly and the wings, but comes to a small enough point for those extra fine details. So I think it's really the perfect size for this project. I'm going to start by dipping my brush in clean water And we're going to do the orange feathers first. So now I'm looking at my reference photo of the Eastern Bluebird and looking at that for guidance on the coloring. And I'm just going to take the clean water and fill in the whole belly. I'm avoiding the blue areas for now. Color it all along the neck here. Anywhere you see that orange is going to be pulling up into the blue feathers. There might be a little bit of overlap. Different ways you can create those soft edges would include laying the color down side by side, wet and wet, so that they charge alongside each other. That requires quick painting. So instead of doing it that way, we're just going to do one color at a time. We'll let the belly dry completely with the orange, and then we'll re-wet those edges and apply the blue so that it will soften out naturally. That's where we're headed with this. All right, I'm going to re-wet it again. It's drying out so fast. And next I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna. Might be a good idea to spray your paints to reactivate them if they've been sitting on a palette for a while. Transparent orange and burnt sienna is what I'm mixing up now. I think it's going to create the perfect combination for the orange belly of our bluebird. And then we'll start right here along the shoulder of the wing, underneath the head and neck. Because we pre-wet the paper, it's softening out beautifully. Now the white belly, we want to make sure we avoid that with the paint, so only bring the orange paint right up to where orange meets white, as you see it in the reference photo. Remove some of the excess paint and water from your brush, and you can push and pull the paint a little bit to create that downy feathery shape that you're looking for. And if you want to go darker in any areas, make sure you're just grabbing directly from your palette. Test it on your palette first, and then you can drop it in any areas where you want to go darker, wet on wet. I'm using burnt sienna. I'm going to use a little bit more of the orange too. The burnt sienna is beautiful, but it's not quite orangey enough. So I think the addition of transparent orange is the perfect combination for our bluebird. And I just want more pigment, more color here. I'm moving my brush delicately and feathering it in the direction that I see those feathers moving down and curving around towards the belly. In our reference photo, we see quite a bit of texture within those orange feathers. Removing some of the paint and getting lighter as I come towards the white feathers on the belly. And I think that's a pretty good start. So I'll rinse that out all the way. Actually, though, I'm going to grab that color one more time and pull the orange up underneath the beak. Upon a second glance at my reference photo, I realized that that orange does extend all the way under the beak. So let's do that now while we have it. Okay, now we'll rinse. While the belly is drying, we can go ahead and work in other areas. So if you want to, you can begin to wet the head and feathers, wing feathers, for preparing the surface for our blue paint. Now I have two blues that are good candidates for a bluebird. Ultramarine blue is a warmer blue, which means it's a little more purple, and phthalo blue is a cool blue, which means it leans a little more green or yellow. And I think the combination of those two will make a good medium, almost perfect primary blue for our bluebird. Of course, you can always test it on a test piece of paper first if you want to just see what they look like on their own. Ultramarine actually looks really good by itself, but let's see what it looks like mixing in a little bit of the phthalo blue. Oh, I think that's so perfect. Let's try that. I'm going to start with the top of the head and just delicately dropping it in wet and wet, letting it flow all through the wet area. If you do have any excess water in here, it might push aside that orange paint, so just be careful for that. I'm going to take the blue and paint it right up next to the orange in the bluebird, going darker at the top, and then pulling that all along the back, connecting those two shapes. Where the orange meets the blue, I'm trying to be very delicate with my brush work here so that I don't accidentally push aside that orange paint. And painting around the eye for now. I'm going to remove some of that and remove the excess water on my paper towel, and then soften this out in a lighter tone as I come towards the neck. This transition can be kind of tricky, so be delicate. Make sure you don't have any extra water in your brush. You'll probably hear me saying that a lot. And then once we come back to the wing, grab more paint, and you can be more generous with your application here. Just filling in this solid shape on the top of the wing. You can allow some of the parts of the wing to be a little lighter in value, suggesting shiny feathers catching the light. And then I'm going to take a little more water mixed in so I can go a little bit lighter where the feathers are all separated and folded here. And might as well just paint in the whole tail as well. It's just solid blue. All right, so we'll rinse that out and let it dry for now. And while that's drying, of course, you can always work in other areas of the painting. So we need to add some shadow tone to the white feathers on the belly. To do that, let's re-wet it for the softest possible look with our water. If it touches the blue a little, you might notice it bleeding into the area, but that's okay. It's kind of a cool shadow tone anyway, so allow that to happen. There's still a tinted bit of blue in my brush. Now I'm going to take a tiny hint of indigo, which is more of a gray than a blue if you're using Daniel Smith. You could also use Payne's gray, it would work beautifully. And I'm just dabbing that in on the underside of the belly to create a shadow cast by the body. I'm also going to paint a subtle shadow right under the wing. And then while I have that color in my brush, I can increase the value on the top of the head, going a little darker. Remove some of that paint. The head's already dry. It dries out so fast. Here in Colorado, the environment is super dry. Okay, and then let's do the feet. We'll use our indigo for that. Nothing too detailed here, just little brush strokes suggesting the curving toes, the dark gray legs, wrapping around a branch or whatever it is that our little bird is sitting on. Paper is dry here, so you can allow your brush to skip across the surface, missing little bumps or gaps in the paper so that it looks more textural, like the ridges of the little bird's feet. Okay, so our blue is still wet. You'll want to be careful as you work around that. Let's come back to the beak. You can use your dark indigo color again. If you want it to be a pure black, mix in some brown. That will help neutralize the blue in that paint and give you a pure black. So very carefully, we'll paint the beak next. There's a little suggestion of the eye showing on this side as the head is turning. And then the little beak. Let's do the bottom side of it. Dark colored here. Work slowly and carefully. Then I'm going to remove some from my brush so I have a lighter gray. And paint in the rest of the beak, leaving one small highlight in the middle. Now I'm delicately blotting, creating the look of tiny subtle feather texture leading up towards the eye. Here's where you want to really observe your reference photo closely for subtle, beautiful details. Tiny little shapes that you can include with your gray. Or before doing the area around the eye, let's go ahead and paint the darkest black portion of it. It's just a circle shape. And since the head is turning toward us, it's not a perfect circle, it's more of a vertical oval shape, just because of the angle of the head. Paint carefully around your highlight. And then once you've done that, you can fill it in more quickly. And instantly it looks so much cuter. And then you can paint this gentle, tiny little rim around the eye. So you should have a shadow and then a light colored rim as it transitions to the blue feathers. Yes, this one's quite a character. All right, I'm going to boost the color of the blue in the face. I want it to be even more vibrant, so I'm taking another layer, and since the head is dry, I can scrape my brush across the surface, again letting it miss those little gaps of the paper. This allows for more beautiful feathered texture. By now, these wing feathers should be dry, so you can go over those again with another blue layer if you wish. I'm going to use more pure ultramarine. And just taking that beautiful blue, raking it across the surface of the paper. Slow down where you have changes in shape and color and adjust for those. Then here, where we have those parallel lines showing the separated wing feathers, take your dark color, in this case I'm using indigo, and go ahead and paint over the top of your pencil marks those little separations. You'll need a steady hand here. The goal is just to make sure that you're leaving light colored gaps in between your brush strokes. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a suggestion of the wing. In my reference photo of the Eastern Bluebird, the tips of the wings get a bit darker here, so I'm just going to take some more indigo and paint a solid dark shape. And then one little brush stroke separating the tail feathers. A little bit of gray here at the top. And I'm going to add one more blue brush stroke on the top of the head, making it extra dark, dark blue there. Now it's your chance to double check your drawing, your colors, your edges. I'm pretty happy with this one little lost edge here, and I may end up erasing the pencil mark leading up to that. But I want to smooth out my orange in the belly or the breast of the bird first. So I'm going to take another layer of my transparent orange burnt sienna combo and just really reinforce that color on the breast. This is now dry paper, so I can just feather my brush over the surface, once again using dry brush technique to make it look like soft, downy feathers. And then you can pull whatever is left on your brush across the white of the belly for just a little more texture. Yes, there we go. So for the last thing, let's just add a branch underneath our bird. I'm going to take transparent brown oxide, or you could use burnt sienna, and we're going to make a suggestion of a little railing for our bird to sit on. I want to just scrape my brush a little bit to create texture. And I think that's all it needs. Just a little hint. And then the very last thing is to add our transparent orange spatter. So for this, I'm grabbing some orange paint, making sure that my brush has lots of water in it. I won't usually tell you that, but for spatter you do need a really wet brush. And then I'm just going to gently tap, helping release those little droplets onto the paper. Don't go overboard with this technique. It could be easy to just go crazy with it. But we just want a subtle hint of spatter. And then I'll create more purposeful circles for that whimsical look. Maybe one more right over here. There we go. So there's the finished bluebird. You can see he fits right in with the rest of the birds. We just have one more bird to go, and I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm deciding to change the very last bird. It's going to be, instead of a mourning dove, a purple finch. I found the perfect photo to fit this one little corner. So I hope you guys will like it. I'll see you in the next video.